The invitation was meant to be polite. That was the first clue. It arrived on thick paper, formal language, elegant typeface. Everything about it suggested prestige. A benefit concert. A celebrated European opera house. An evening honoring classical excellence. Anthony Hopkins had been invited as a guest, not a performer. A respected actor lending gravitas to the night. He accepted without hesitation. Music had always been private for him. Something done alone, early in the morning or late at night, when no one was watching. He didn't speak about it much. He didn't advertise it. In an industry addicted to spectacle, he preferred quiet competence. The opera singer knew this. Or thought he did. The singer, world-famous, technically flawless, adored for his voice and feared for his arrogance, had a reputation. He was brilliant, yes, but he enjoyed hierarchy. Enjoyed reminding people who belonged where. Actors were not singers. Film was not opera. And Anthony Hopkins to him was a dignified guest, nothing more. The evening began as expected. Black tie audience. Velvet seats. The kind of hush that only exists in rooms built to amplify breath itself. Hopkins sat in the front section. Hands folded loosely, posture relaxed. He listened carefully, not as a critic, but as someone who respected discipline. The singer delivered aria after aria with thunderous precision. The audience applauded on command. It was impressive. It was also expected. Then came the moment that changed everything. During a short intermission segment, the host invited the singer back on stage for light conversation. Anecdotes. Humor. Something to humanize the genius. The singer smiled, soaking in the attention. "You know," he said, gesturing toward the audience, "we have many distinguished guests tonight." Polite laughter. "And some," he continued, eyes drifting toward Hopkins, "who are masters of other arts." A pause. Hopkins felt the room's attention shift subtly. Not aggressively. Just enough to register. The singer smiled wider. "Sir Anthony Hopkins," he said, voice smooth. "An extraordinary actor." Applause followed. Hopkins nodded once modestly. The singer tilted his head. "I hear you enjoy music." Hopkins smiled faintly. "Idol." The singer chuckled. "Of course you do. Who doesn't?" Laughter again. Then the pivot. "But enjoying music," the singer continued, "and mastering it are very different things." A ripple went through the audience. Not discomfort yet. Anticipation. The singer gestured toward the orchestra pit. "Opera is unforgiving," he said. "No cameratrix. No second takes." A few knowing laughs. Hopkins remained still. The singer looked directly at him now. "Tell me," he said, tone playful, "have you ever sung classical?" There it was. The question wasn't cruel. It was calculated. Framed as curiosity. Delivered as charm. Hopkins didn't rush to answer. "Yes," he said simply. The singer blinked. "Just once." "Ah," he said. "At home perhaps?" Few laughs. Hopkins nodded. "Often." The singer smiled indulgently. "Well," he said, "this is a house that values courage." The audience leaned in. "Would you care," the singer continued, "to give us a note?" The host stiffened slightly. The orchestra members exchanged looks. Hopkins felt it then. Not pressure, not embarrassment, but clarity. This was a test. And it wasn't about music. It was about status. The singer believed this would end one of two ways. A polite refusal that confirmed the hierarchy, or a brief, awkward attempt that reinforced it. Hopkins stood. Not immediately. Not defiantly. He stood the way someone stands when they've already decided. The room went quiet. The singer raised an eyebrow. "Truly?" Hopkins nodded. "If that's all right." The singer gestured grandly. "By all means." There was a piano on stage. Polished. Pristine. Untouched since rehearsal. Hopkins walked toward it calmly. "No teatrix. No epalegi." He paused, looking out at the audience. "This is your house," he said gently to the singer. "So you choose." The singer hesitated just a fraction of a second. "Schubert," he said quickly. "Something simple." "Simple." Hopkins nodded. He sat at the piano, adjusted the bench slightly, and closed his eyes. Not in prayer, not in drama. In listening. The orchestra members leaned forward. The singer folded his arms, confident. Hopkins played the opening notes himself. Clean. Unadorned. Correct. A few heads snapped up. Then he sang. Not loudly. Not forcefully. But precisely. The room changed. This wasn't novelty. This wasn't an actor dabbling. This was someone who understood breath, phrasing, restraint. Hopkins' voice wasn't operatic in the traditional sense. Didn't need to be. It carried intention, musical intelligence, respect for the piece. The singer's smile faltered. Hopkins continued. Each phrase landed where it was supposed to. No stran. No showmanship. Just control. The audience didn't applaud. Not yet. They were listening too closely. By the second verse, the orchestra members were staring openly. One violinist forgot to turn a page. The singer uncrossed his arms. Hopkins finished the piece quietly. Let the final note decay naturally. Didn't rush the silence. Then he stood. No bow. No flatist. Just stillness. The silence held. Then applause. Not polite. Not automatic. Real. The singer clapped last. Slowly. Hopkins returned to his seat without comment. The host tried to recover, laughing nervously. Well, he said. That was unexpected. The singer leaned toward the microphone again, but his tone had changed. Mr. Hopkins, he said carefully. Where did you study? Hopkins met his gaze. I didn't, he said. The room murmured. I listened, Hopkins added. For many years. The singer nodded stiffly. Talent, he said, finds many forms. Hopkins smiled faintly. Discipline does. That line landed harder than the performance. The rest of the evening continued, but something had shifted permanently. Backstage, the singer avoided Hopkins. Not out of anger. Out of recalibration. Because the joke had failed. And the audience, every single one of them, had witnessed something rare. Not humiliation. Not revenge. But quiet mastery revealed only when challenged. The full consequence of that moment, the private conversation afterward, the apology that never came, and the way the opera world spoke of it for years, had yet to unfold. But one thing was already certain. Anthony Hopkins had not tried to impress anyone. He had simply refused to be underestimated. And that, more than the music, was what shocked everyone. The applause eventually faded, but the silence it left behind lingered. Not the awkward kind. The contemplative kind, the kind that forces people to reassess what they thought they knew. Anthony Hopkins sat quietly in his seat as the program resumed. He didn't scan the crowd for reactions. Didn't look toward the singer. He listened as he always did, fully present, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. But everything had changed. The singer returned to the stage later that evening for his final aria. Technically flawless. Impeccably delivered. Yet something intangible had shifted. The performance was still brilliant, but it no longer felt untouchable. Not diminished. Humanized. Backstage, the corridors buzzed in hushed tones. That wasn't luck. He knew exactly what he was doing. Did you hear the phrasing? Musicians spoke in technical language now. Breath control. Tempo choices. Respect for the score. This was no longer gossip, it was analysis. The singer overheard it all. He stood in his dressing room afterward, costume half removed, staring at his reflection. The arrogance hadn't vanished, but it had cracked. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar. Misjudgment. A junior conductor approached him cautiously. That was impressive, he said, meaning Hopkins. The singer nodded once. Yes. Nothing more. No dismissal. No joke. Just acknowledgement. Later that night at the reception, Hopkins stood near a side table speaking quietly with a composer. No crowd gathered around him. No one demanded explanations. Those who approached did so respectfully, almost carefully. They didn't ask how he could sing. They asked when he learned to listen like that. Hopkins answered honestly. Over time, he said. By not assuming I knew better. Across the room, the opera singer watched him. For a long moment he didn't move. Then finally he approached. Mr. Hopkins, he said. Hopkins turned. Yes. The singer paused. The room seemed to quiet instinctively. Not because anyone expected drama, but because everyone sensed this mattered. I owe you an apology, the singer said. Hopkins raised an eyebrow slightly, not in surprise but curiosity. For what? Hopkins asked. For treating you like a novelty, the singer replied. And for assuming. Hopkins considered him. Assumptions, he said gently, are very efficient. They save time. The singer gave a thin smile. And cost accuracy. Hopkins nodded. Often. The singer hesitated. You could have embarrassed me. Hopkins met his eyes. That wasn't my goal. Then what was? Hopkins answered without hesitation. To respect the music. The singer exhaled slowly. You did. There was no reconciliation scene. No dramatikhanscheck. Just two men acknowledging a recalibration of ground. The opera singer never made a joke like that again. Not publicly. Not privately. And over the following years the story spread, but not the way stories usually do. It wasn't exaggerated. It wasn't sensationalized. It was told quietly, by musicians to musicians. Be careful who you test. Some people prepare in silence. Respect isn't owned by titles. Hopkins never spoke of it publicly. When asked in interviews about music, he redirected the conversation toward listening, toward humility, toward the discipline of restraint. But those who were there never forgot the moment. Not because an actor sang classical music, but because a hierarchy collapsed without confrontation. Years later, a young music student approached Hopkins after a lecture. Is it true, the student asked nervously, that you once shocked an opera house? Hopkins smiled faintly. I don't think I shocked anyone, he said. But you sang, the student pressed. Yes. And they didn't expect it. Hopkins nodded. The student hesitated. Why didn't you say no? Hopkins thought about it for a moment. Because saying no would have agreed with the assumption, he said. The student frowned. Which assumption? That curiosity was disrespect, Hopkins replied. It wasn't. He paused. Disrespect was thinking the question already had an answer. The student nodded slowly. That was the lesson. Not about singing. Not about talent. About quiet preparation. About refusing to let other people define the limits of your seriousness. Anthony Hopkins didn't defeat anyone that night. He didn't compete. He didn't win. He simply revealed a truth that made competition irrelevant. That mastery does not announce itself. That humility often hides depth. And that the most shocking moments aren't loud. They're precise. The opera singer continued his career. Still celebrated. Still brilliant. But something in him changed after that night. He became more cautious with his humor. More respectful of disciplines outside his own. Not because he had been embarrassed, but because he had been educated. And Anthony Hopkins returned home, as he always did, to quiet mornings and private music. No audience. No applause. Just listening. Because that had always been the point. The challenge had been meant as a joke. The response had been sincere. And sincerity, when it's backed by years of silent discipline, has a way of shocking everyone in the room, without ever trying to.